Hello, my name is Horama, and today I have found a few strange encounters people have experienced with the various mythical and supernatural forces of the world from multiple subreddits, and will be narrating them here. But before we begin, I did want to ask that if you end up enjoying my narrations, then please do consider liking and subscribing, as that really does help the channel a lot. But either way, without any further ado, let's get into the narrations. The first story has been posed by user Mystical Mercury. For some context, I am a male. This takes place when I was around 12 years old, and is probably the most terrifying night of my entire life. My name is James. My friend is called Jesse. He's around 4 months older than me, but that isn't really important. It was the year 2016. Summer vacation had just started, and I was living my best life on Fallout 4. Jesse's distant grandma, that he actually never met, had passed away the week before, and so his parents were out of town. My mom said that he could stay with us while his parents sorted things out in their hometown. Jesse was staying in my room with me, which, well, as 12-year-olds, we loved. We had been the best of friends for as long as I can remember, and we still are. So, as all teens or preteens do, we were intent on sleeping as little as possible each and every night. One night we decided what we were going to do is sneak out. Not for any malicious purposes. For some reason we just liked the thrill of knowing that we had been wandering around my block while my parents were asleep and didn't know we were out. My parents were usually too preoccupied with my older brother and sister since, well, we found out my sister was pregnant. After some wandering around, we went to the local park and just chilled there for a while. That's when we heard something that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think of it. A woman's scream. And it didn't sound like it was that far away from where we were. Immediately I regretted sneaking out and thought we should run back home. But Jesse wanted to investigate. He said he was worried that someone was getting hurt, and so I reluctantly agreed to search for the source of the scream. We thought it came from the other side of this small forest, but we were too afraid to walk through it, and so we walked around the edge of the tree line. That's when we saw a woman crouched over something up ahead. She was facing the other direction, and Jesse called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She stood up, but didn't turn to face us, and didn't respond either. Her hands looked bloody. We slowly moved towards her. "Ma'am, did you scream? Are you alright?" Jessie said, lightly poking her back. She turned to us and vomited up a liquid. It was dark brown and smelled like rusty metal. Even worse, there was something moving inside the liquid. Maggots, I think. We just froze. Neither of us had any clue what to do. She looked at us with her gaunt face and cloudy eyes, pushed me with surprising force, and just ran into the forest. That's when we saw a rotten dead deer with bite marks. She had been eating the rotten, raw deer, and seemed like she had been tearing it apart with her hands. How this was even possible, I have no clue. We just looked at each other and ran home. We were so scared that we didn't sleep at all that night. Whoever she was, we never saw her again. Never heard any reports of a crazy woman being found living in the forest. Nothing. We still don't really understand what we saw, but all I can say is I'm thankful she didn't seem to want to harm us. The next story has been posed by user Shaquille08M 3AL97. About 2 weeks ago, I've been getting stuck in my dreams. No matter how hard I try to wake up, it's nearly impossible. I wake up feeling drained, or like I'm waking up from anesthesia after approximately 10 to 13 hours of sleep. Normally, I sleep around 6 or 8 hours. My dreams tend to take place from where I was younger, but in a eerie and an unsettling way. Anyways, that's what my dreams have been like, no matter at night or during a nap. My older sister said that last week she was walking down the hall past my room. My door was open, and normally I shut it before sleeping. And she noticed, out of her peripheral vision, something was walking in my room at the same pace as she was, and she originally thought it was me, but she noticed it was looking at her as if it was trying to figure out how to walk properly. And she also noticed it looked like me, but when I had long hair. She saw it twice in one day, and she says it seemed to be trying to mock how she was walking, but she ignored it and saw me in the kitchen, where she told me she just saw this figure in my room. Now, last night, I stayed at my boyfriend's house and texted my younger sister, whose room is across from mine, to make sure my bedroom door was closed shut, but her phone was on Do Not Disturb. She got home and started walking down the hall to get her room. She said she was being kind of loud with her keys banging against the hydro flask, which normally would irritate me if I'm trying to sleep. She said she heard my door open, and as she was walking near her bedroom door, she heard a whisper say, "What are you doing?" And obviously she assumed it was me being irritated that she was being so loud, and so she looked up, moving her hair out of her face that prevented her from seeing my bedroom door in the first place. And that's when she realized my door was open, but no one was there. She hurried her room and opened her texts, and that's when she saw 20 minutes prior I had just asked her to close my door because I wasn't home. She was super freaked out, to say the least, and we began FaceTiming. My boyfriend was making jokes about it, and I told him to stop because I didn't want him to mock whatever this thing was. Soon after that FaceTime, I told my boyfriend that her phone probably died. But right after, she texted me saying, "Did your phone die?" And I responded with no. There wasn't any kind of call failed message that popped up on either of our screens. The call just ended as if the other hung up. The energy in my room has been unsettling, like something is watching me. My sleep has been abnormal, and when I do wake up, something pulls me back into a deep sleep. What could this be that's mocking me, and why is it trying to imitate me? I can't find anything online on what this could be, so this forum is my last resort for answers. Please tell me anything you may know about this. Is it a demon? Just a curious spirit, maybe? The next story has been posed by user Cuisine Art Official. A few years ago, maybe in 2018, two friends and I went on a multi-day hiking trip in Alberta, Canada. We were approximately half a kilometer from the nearest road. There were game trails near our camping spot, about roughly 100 meters away. It was already dark, about 11 p.m. I walked into the woods, and 10 meters away from the camp, getting further from the trail. It was on the edge of a cliff face, not sheer, but close to it, at a 70-degree angle or thereabouts. After I had finished my business, I started to turn back to the camp, but I felt a sense that I was being watched. It made me nervous. I looked down the cliff face and saw a figure standing there, 20 meters away, just staring at me. It was tall. It's hard to estimate its height from my memory, but it seemed much taller than me, and I'm 6'1". The figure was slim and wearing one of those low top wide brimmed fedora hats made of felt. I just stared at him, or maybe it, frozen for a minute or two, feeling the worst terror I have ever felt. The surroundings were already pitch black, but this thing was clearly darker. It walked behind a bush and disappeared. It seemed to be observing me. Initially, I assumed it was one of my buddies messing with me, but when I turned around, both of them were still sitting by the fire. I had forgotten about this, but a recent event brought back the memory to me. I had been asleep when I was suddenly awoken by pitch blackness. I looked around the room and saw a figure in the doorway. This figure, it was the same I had seen years earlier, just observing me. I felt such terror in that moment that I couldn't move. We stared at each other for maybe a minute until eventually it backed up out of sight and disappeared. The next story has been posed by user Casual NFL Enjoyer. A friend of mine and I have been experiencing strange things as of late, the past week or so. My first potential encounter with this thing happened 7 years ago, but in the past week, my friend and I have experienced some terrifying phenomena, climaxing at what we saw earlier today. This story starts around 7 years ago. I was camping with my family in northern Michigan. The campsite was near a large lake, so we went swimming quite often. I looked across the lake and saw a large, white figure moving on the other side. It was around 8 feet tall, had no hair, walked upright, and had zero visible facial features. The moment I saw it, it ran, and I mean full-on sprinted into the woods. This was my first encounter. The story picks up around a week ago when my friend was in his house, home alone with his dog. It was around 11 p.m. He was in his bedroom when he heard his mother's voice speaking to his recently deceased dog. His other living dog appeared to hear the voices as well. His mother was at work, so it could not have been her, and the dog to whom the voice was referring had died around 4 weeks beforehand. After this comes my second experience. I was reading in my room when my mother's voice called for me to come to the living room. The sound was accompanied by what sounded like someone walking in my living room. The only people home at that time were me and my brothers, who were both asleep in their room. So I panicked and locked my door. But thankfully, nothing happened for the rest of the night. The next day, my mother came into my room, asking me what I wanted. I was confused, as I did not call her name. After I explained this, she appeared shocked, nearly certain that my voice had come from my bedroom. And finally, earlier today, my friend was walking his dog when he heard a rustling noise in a nearby sewer. Thinking that it was a raccoon, he walked over and looked into the drain. And what was staring back at him was a creature that he described as a completely white, bald, thin humanoid that had no facial features, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing. It looked around 9 feet tall, but it was hard to tell due to its crouched position. After a few seconds, the creature dashed away into the sewers at an incredibly high speed. My friend then immediately called me and explained the situation, which led us to write this post. We would like to know if we are in any danger from this creature, and if so, how to protect ourselves from it, as well as what this creature may be. The next story has been posted by a since-deleted user. My daughter, who is 11 years old at the time, was visiting my parents for the weekend during the summer. They own 55 acres in the woods in northern Michigan. Most of the property near the home is cleared, roughly 7 acres. The rest has sporadic trees here and there until you get to the back 8 acres. Before it gets dark, they like to sit out on their screened-in porch and watch the deer come out to eat, which was done this night. The plan was to wait till sundown so she could start practicing riding her CT200 Coleman bike. It is a small bike that only went 20 miles per hour, and it had a decent headlight on it, so it was good for the clear trails on the property. While she was sitting on the porch with my dad, just before sunset, my daughter was watching the open field for deer, but instead she saw something that looked like a white dog moving very slowly. It was roughly 200 yards away from them, and she said, "Grandpa, what is that?" He looked, and he was very confused. My dad is a man who has grown up in the woods. He knows every animal and everything possible about where they live. He told her it looked like it could have been a white coyote. It had a similar size at least, but it didn't look like any coyote he had seen. The body of the creature was very thin, almost just bones, and it didn't have a tail. He went and quickly grabbed binoculars from inside the house. He looked and he said, "It looks really deformed, like a deformed pit bull. It's facing away so I can't really see its face." It left view and they continued sitting there, waiting for dark. When the sun set, my dad made sure to tell her not to go fast, because riding at night was something new. He knew that she knew the lay of the land well, but was worried since it was her first time doing laps night riding. When he was done with his safety brief, she took off, and as she was riding her way around the property, she had this weird feeling of being watched. But she pushed those thoughts aside because she assumed it was nerves on top of it being dark in the woods. As she rounded the corner to the straightaway with her light shining down the path, the light from her bike reflected back two eyes. She slowed her bike down, thinking that it was a coyote or a deer. As she came slowly closer, she realized it was pure white. She was frozen in a panic when she realized that this creature was the same thing she and my dad had seen in the field. Only this time, she was only feet away. The creature was facing her, and she was able to clearly see its head this time. It was crouching, with its long skinny arms hanging down against its side. It had the head of a human dying of malnutrition. It had a huge chest, and its rib cage was very prominent. What she thought was white fur was skin. It had white skin with gray undertones. It looked like death. Its eyes were half the size of its head and completely reflected the light from her bike. She was still riding towards it, unable to react due to being frozen in fear. The creature's mouth then became clear. It was really unnatural. As she got closer, she started to realize that this creature was very tall. Like my dad, who is 6'3", looked small in comparison. She said the long skinny arms that hung down to its sides had human-like hands. She started to feel sick and woozy. Then she snapped out of it, turned the bike around and headed back to the house as fast as the bike went. The world of the paranormal is a strange, yet very interesting one. While I do believe in the paranormal to some extent, I also consider myself a skeptic. But even so, I cannot understand how some people can disregard the paranormal so blatantly, since, well, isn't it intriguing? Isn't the idea of a massive man-wolf creature that stalks the forests and mountains of the world such an interesting concept? Even if I was a complete skeptic who didn't believe in anything without strict scientific proof, I would still love and entertain the idea of such creatures purely for the fact that their mere existence suggests a world yet to be discovered or explored, full of unknown wonder. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations. And even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.